Right, so we are in chapter 13 and we want to talk about network services. What network services have you read about in the chapter, or which ones have you used before? What do you think we're going to talk about today? DNS server, great. DNS server, any other ones? FTP server, great, great. Any other ones? Samba, yeah, which is a Windows file sharing server. Well, there's quite a few of them there, all right? And so we're going to talk about some, and then I'll show you how to configure others, okay? So just to show you basics, let me log in. And most systems are configured by graphical user interfaces, which on the Red Hat family servers start with system config and then followed by a name of the service. So that's sort of the scheme for naming a GUI. So last week we used the -network GUI. Previously we used -printer, but you can see that we have additional ones. You can configure the NFS server, you can configure the Samba server, you can configure all the different services, and even you can configure even Apache with these utilities. You can install them, of course, with Yum, or you can install them at the beginning during the install under system configuration. Okay, so let's get started maybe with something fairly easy and something that we're all familiar with, and that is a web server. Okay, a web server. So to install a web server on a Fedora type system, we would say yum install HTTPD, because HTTP is the protocol the websites use, and D stands for daemon. Let's run it. And so it says, yeah, if you'd like to install it, I can do that for you, and it goes up to the repositories and installs the server. Let me say right away too that the way I am installing this particular server is by using a binary that someone has already compiled for me. And it's not a big deal, but if you consider the fact that this binary now is part of the operating system, and if I in the future upgrade the operating system, well, this binary is going to be upgraded with it. I would suggest that when you consider perhaps Apache as your production system, not to run it off of inside of the operating system like we're doing it right now. Because right now it's really part of the operating system. It's like a utility inside of the operating system, like under accessories. Whereas in your production system, you probably want to compile from source and put it under user local Apache. And when you do that, you can upgrade the entire operating system, and that server is not going to be touched, which is great because you may have PHP applications or Perl applications or Ruby on Rails applications that require Apache at a specific version. So you might be upgrading your OS nightly. You might say, hey, all the patches that you have, go ahead and install on my operating system. So you don't want your important servers to be upgraded automatically as well. Okay, but for the ease of use, I'm not going to show you how to compile this from scratch. You can look up my YouTube videos on how to do that. All right, so we installed Apache. I issued yum install HTTPD. Questions? Didn't work for you. Are you on the internet right now? Okay. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be on the internet right now. Let me help you with that. Okay, so in the virtual machine, there is a network adapter, and so inside of settings, I have it set to bridged, which is how you can access my virtual machine. So what I'd like you to do is go ahead and set your virtual machines to bridged as well. Later on, you'll be able to access each other's IP addresses. Okay, it's at the bottom of the virtual machine. It looks like a screen, network adapter. Go to settings. Another way to get there is by going to virtual machine. Then you can go to virtual machine settings and then network adapter and switch it to bridged. Okay, so we will run yum install httpd to actually run the installation for Apache. Okay, all right, so now I'm going to go ahead, once it's installed, I'm going to go ahead and start it. Okay, the configuration files, the configuration programs are structured as system-config, name of the service. To start the service, you will say /etc/init.d/name of the service, followed by start. Now this startup script oftentimes will also initialize the service if it's the first time that we're running it. Okay, so that's what it would be. This is the same as saying service httpd start. Okay, it's the same as saying that. And we can also maybe issue the status. We can say start, stop, restart. That's how we can start the service. So now that we started it, I should be able to open the browser. And it's going to take just a moment. Open the browser. All right, and now, because my browser is on the local server, right, I can go ahead and say localhost like this, and look, my Apache website is running. So that's the server we just configured. But what if I wanted to access this website from another system? I have to find out what IP address my system is using. I can do it in a few ways. I could go back to my terminal. I could say ifconfig. But now I can do something like this. What is my IP? And when you Google that, Google will tell you what your IP is. Well, that's my external IP address. So that's not going to work. Let me take maybe a service that's inside of gRCC, see what the IP address is. Okay, so this is the IP address that our internal system is reporting, and so that's what I could use. It's the same as saying right here, ifconfig. That's this IP address. Okay, so let's see what might happen if I minimize my Linux system, and now I am inside of the Windows box, and I'll put in that IP address. And that IP address is, oh, I had it just here. 204.137, yeah. 172.224.224.137. All right, we're running it, and look at this. This is the same page as what I had in my local host. So what we see right now is that as long as my bridged connection is selected, my IP address for any service that I'm running inside of my virtual machine is available also to the host and to actually anyone of you. If you wanted to type this in your browser, you can. I can at the same time say something like tail var log httpd access, and so now I'm viewing all the entries and your different IP addresses are coming up as you are using my Apache server. All right, so you can see that I can do a few refreshes here, and so this IP address is going to show that it's a Windows box that's accessing it. Okay, so that's how you'll be able to, thank you for refreshing it, I appreciate that. Apache is pretty quick that way, isn't it? Okay, so Web servers are very important. Many things are residing on the web server, so we'll spend a little bit of time on it. The log files, if you use yum to install it, are stored under var log httpd. And so I have an error log and I have access log. Access log has all the entries that were both successful and unsuccessful. And error log has internal errors as well as all the URLs that were not found on your server. The config file is under etc. So etc is our main directory to go for config files, followed by the name of the service. Again, just like with service-config with etc init.d server's name, the config files are usually found here. etc, name of the service, and then per specific server there might be a configuration directory, or there might be config files right inside of the directory. So this is my config file. I'm going to open it now, and it's just a text file which basically allows me to modify how Apache is running, how it's responding, what it's doing. Most of the servers which we manage on Linux systems are configured by a text file. Okay, so there is no magic as far as how to communicate with the service, but the magic is in understanding what all these lines are doing, so that instead of trying to fix it, you're not breaking it. So one element that you could try here is that system config httpd or httpd, and this is a nice utility which allows me to take the same text file as you saw. Okay, so let's run it here. System config httpd. So it's the same text file, but this text file is read in through a GUI, and when that happens, the curve of learning in terms of how to use the server is really diminished. So notice that I now don't deal with a specific text file. I now deal with buttons and basically a nice explanations of how the server is going to work. So for example, the webmaster email is root at localhost. I could modify that. I can change the addresses that Apache is listening on. I can create something called virtual hosts, which basically in Apache virtual hosts are configurations that allow you to listen for different websites. If my server was Microsoft.com and Google.com, I can run it off a single Apache system. Depending on which URL is requested, it would show a different website. And that's what virtual host is. And so we can modify what the error web pages look like that get sent to the browser. We can modify where the log files are going. We can modify any level of Apache. Okay, so this GUI is nice, but really to edit everything that Apache can do, you would have to go back to the config file. So this GUI gives you a general idea of what Apache can do. For more detail, you actually do have to go to the clear text config. Any questions about Apache server?
Is there any alternate UI applets that do more though? I mean, that are not installed by default?
Yeah, there is a number of GUIs. There's one called Comanche that can be used actually on Windows. Having said that, the Apache config file itself is not that difficult to read. There are some config files that are very difficult to read. Apache is not one of them. So that's why most administrators are going to go right into the file to actually modify it. Okay, so what if I wanted to see not this website, but maybe I want to see something really cool, some database-driven website, okay? Well, we can do that. Let's consider a program called Drupal. And let's download it and let's try to make it work. Because this is a database-driven software, what are we missing so far as our servers go? We have web server. What are we missing? This is a database-driven software. Database, that's right. So we will need database. So the textbook shows you how to install PostgreSQL, how to configure it. PostgreSQL is a great database. It's open source. It's very fast, and I like it. If we look at Drupal, though, the database that it is more native to is called MySQL. So I'm going to show you how to configure the MySQL database, and then if you want to, you can follow up with the PostgreSQL. Okay, so first we would go to documentation and we would go to installation guide to actually find out what in the world it is that we need to do. And as part of it, we go to system requirements, disk space, web server. Oh, look at that, Apache 2, that's what we are installing. And we can check what version of Apache we're running. And let's see. Let's try to say HTTP-L. Okay, so this will show us the number of, let's see here, version. Okay, so -V. So we're running Apache 2.217, so that's within the requirements. And then the database server, right? So this is the database server we're talking about. Let's go ahead and install MySQL 5.15. Well, because we are going to use Yum, what I will do is first we'll install the database and then we'll look up its version, see what we have available in the repositories. And this is another limitation that you have once you start working with the pre-made software that comes with the operating system. You're sort of tied to the version of it, right? You're tied to the version. Okay, so if I was to look at what Yum offers as far as MySQL goes, you can see that it's quite the list. We are going to need 2 libraries. First one is the actual MySQL server. This MySQL, I believe, is just the client side, and there is a separate MySQL server. Finally, we will need a PHP MySQL library, because the database server talks to the web server through this module called PHP. Well, let's get going with it. Yum install MySQL-server. All right, and so it's going to install the libraries for us automatically, which is great. All right, and so what we will do later on, once we have this Drupal thing running, we're going to create an FTP server, and we'll be able to connect from the Windows system right inside of the Linux system, just like the web developers would do, to a remote website. Then we'll create a Windows share so that we can access our Drupal site. And then we'll play with NFS and some of the other servers. Okay, so as this is downloading, let's go ahead and take a look at some other requirements. We are going to need PHP, so we'll download that as well. In fact, the moment we ask for this PHP MySQL library, PHP will be downloaded as well. See, because it's one of the dependencies. And most of all, we are going to need the actual PHP files for Drupal. And to get that, we'll go to the download section. And so we'll go ahead and download. All right, let's see what's happening here. Okay, so it looks like we are getting MySQL version 5 for clients, and it looks like it's going to be MySQL version 5 also for the server. So I'll go ahead and download Drupal 7.12, and this comes in a tar.gz. We'll say OK to that. All right, and let's see. This is downloading, and this is also downloading. All right. Okay, so now MySQL Server is getting installed. That's great. Let's go ahead and start our MySQL Server. Now it's installed. Who remembers how to start a service, a server like MySQL? All right, so service, we could say MySQL D start. Bingo. We could have said /etc/init.d/mysqld space start. Either way would have been fine. Okay, so now MySQL is running. So notice I mentioned that when you start the service the first time, sometimes you go through initialization steps and setting passwords and so forth. I could probably type in now MySQL and I'm inside of the database. I can say something like show databases and it shows me what I have in terms of databases. I can say create database, my database, and maybe we will create a table, create table, my table, made out of X as an integer and name as text. And I can say insert into my table, go ahead and put 1 in some expression. Whoops. Yeah, I forgot the word values. And finally I can say select all from my table. All right, and so that's how a database works. You start creating tables inside, and then you can get the data out. You can modify the data. It's like a text file on steroids, right? That's what databases are. All right. Now that we have the database, we also have Apache. Okay. We now are going to install that second part, and that is PHP. So yum install php-mysql. So php-mysql is actually a php-mysql. It's a module that allows PHP to talk to the database. Okay, but it is a PHP module, so we will be able to talk to Apache as well. So here's PHP common, and that should be fine. Let's install that. The other great benefit from using yum to install these services is that you do not have to go back to the config files and connect PHP with Apache or PHP with MySQL. All of that is done for you behind the scenes. Okay, so I'm walking through this right now, but I'll give you time in class so that you can run through this on your own. Okay, and we'll make sure that that you're successful doing that. Okay, so our next step is going to be to verify that PHP is working fine. Let's go under var www and then HTML. This is the location where our website is located at. Okay, that's where this web page is from. So I'll create test.php, and inside of this file I'll put something like php info. Okay, And so we'll put test.php at the end. And I can see that my page is displaying, but the PHP module is not actually being activated. Oh well, let's see. What we can do here is we can find what PHP modules we have available. We're missing a piece of software here. PHP itself. Let's see. So let's do that. Yum install PHP like this. Yep, go ahead and do that. All right, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to track the steps that we performed so far. All right, we started by installing Apache. We did this by saying yum install httpd. Then install database, and we did that by saying yum install MySQL server. Then we also said yum install PHP MySQL, and then we decided we really need to install PHP as well. Yum install PHP. That's where we are at right now. Let's see what my web server is doing. It's probably requiring a restart. Service HTTPD restart. And now refresh. Oh, look at that. So here's a lesson about servers. When you change the config file, you have to restart the server for the new config to kick in. As I am running these lines for yum install, they are modifying the config files. And you have to restart for this to be activated. All right. So now we have to then install Drupal, and you do that by download this file right here called Drupal 712. So download Drupal 712.tar.gz. Now we'll issue tar xzvf on that very file, because we need to decompress and unarchive. Okay, this file has to go under specific directory where Apache can find it. Okay, so we will go ahead and put it under var www.html. So let's do that, tar xzvf, and get it out of my student user downloads folder. And this is going to be the Drupal file. All right, what happened here? Where is this downloads file? Oh, I'm logged in as myself. Okay, so this is going to be a different user here. And so now I decompressed this this particular system, and that's the entire Apache system. I'm sorry, Drupal system. I'm going to move all these files down one directory. Okay, let's see what happens if I re-execute localhost. Okay, this web page you're looking at right now is generated by the new PHP files that I downloaded from Drupal.org. Okay, so we installed the database, we installed the PHP, which is application server language, and now we are installing an actual Drupal system. In the past, we would have to go into the PHP files and set by hand configuration. Now, we can just execute the install script, which executes automatically. So I can just say save and continue, and this looks very much like a next utility on Windows. All right, so there's stuff we're missing. Drupal requires you to enable PHP extensions in the following list. Okay, and GD, so some of this is for image manipulation. File system, the directories under size default files does not exist. And they didn't have rights to actually create them. Okay. Settings file does not exist. The Drupal installer requires, okay, so basically we have to read this carefully, and in order to install Drupal we have to fix whatever it is that they're suggesting needs to be fixed. Well, what we are going to do first is we're going to give Drupal rights to build these files.